How's it going? I'm Regina here. Welcome to AG Quick Tips. In this one I'm going to give you some tips for ATC communication and a couple of tricks for storing and retrieving ships. My first tip is that when landing, ATC will assign you the closest pad that is the correct size for your ship. You can use this to your advantage and eliminate that sometimes frustrating hunt for the landing pad icon. Once you get familiar with the station's layout, you can use visual cues to navigate. For example, if I'm above Everest Harbor looking down and I imagine the biggest strut with the cargo containers to be 12 o'clock, I know that there's some small pads on the strut that it's at 8 o'clock. Now that I know where I'm going, I can just fly straight to the pad that I want and request landing right before I get there. This, in combination with the new request landing keybind, can make for really nice smooth transitions to landing with minimal delays.
Please proceed to assigned landing bay.
Landing gear deployed.
Speaking of the request landing keybind, if you're a new player or you've been away from Star Citizen for a while, there's now 3 ways to call ATC for landing or for takeoff. The keybind is amazing and I'm so glad that CIG finally added it. I think it's still unbound by default though, and it's not in a particularly logical place in the keybind settings. You'll find it right at the bottom of Ship Movement section. The next method for calling ATC is via the MFDs. I rarely use this, but sometimes the immersion of interacting with MFDs is nice. And on ships that have a million MFDs, you can always designate one to have the comms page open. Speaking of the comms page, if you have an extra MFD, especially one out of your line of sight, like the comms MFD over to the left on the Pisces, or the one on the floor for the Corsair, it's always a good idea to have that comms page open. If you have it open on that screen that's out of sight, it will direct those intrusive NPC calls to that MFD instead of covering up your targeting info when you're fighting. The third way of contacting ATC is by using the Communications tab in the mobiGlas. You can get there directly by pressing F11 or just doing your normal F1, F2 and then using the tabs at the bottom. This one is actually pretty useful as you don't have to be in the pilot seat or even in the ship to use it. It's really handy if you want to open the hangar door while you're on your way to the ship, or maybe you just need to open the hangar for a friend that's flying one of your ships. Next tip. If you retrieve your ship and it's floating above the pad, it's because you left the engines on when storing it. If you're determined not to get on another death elevator, you can build yourself a set of stairs up to your ship with armor boxes. This takes forever though. So the real solution is to store your ship, open the loadout manager, remove the power supplies, and retrieve the ship again. This will put the ship back on the pad. Now you can enter the pilot seat and turn off the engines.
Engines offline.
Once that's done, store the ship one more time and replace the power supply. Now you should be able to retrieve the ship like normal.
Vehicle selected. Stand by.
The last tip today is that if you want to spawn a small ship in a large hangar, all you need to do is retrieve a large ship first, then once it's on the pad, retrieve the small one. This is super useful for loading grav bikes at places like Everest Harbor, where the default pad has a top-loading hangar door that you can't use with a hover bike. It's also handy for loading ships into other ships at a station. You still have to spawn them one at a time and drive them out individually, but you can at least have both ships come out of the same hangar. Alright, that's it. Like if you liked it, subscribe for more, and I hope this was useful to someone. Let me know if there's any tips that I cover that you'd like an expanded video on. Thanks for watching, and until next time,